When German immigrants arrived here in the 1800s, they brought with them a character and culture that would soon have a profound effect on our city. Even today, the legacy that they left behind can still be seen in business, sports, culture, and religion. Welcome to Hoosier History. I'm Rick Maultra. Today we're going to be looking at the largest ethnicity of our city, German immigrants, and specifically those who lived on the Old South Side, which up until a few years ago was a very popular place to live. And there remains some who still live here today that are hoping for a revitalization of their old neighborhood.
The Germans have had a larger influence in the development of Indianapolis than any other foreign nationality. But the nature and extent of this influence is not generally understood by American citizens, chiefly, no doubt, on account of the rapid abandonment of the easily recognizable German language brought about by World War I. The early settlement of Indianapolis, like the rest of Indiana, was chiefly of native-born Americans. At the census of 1850, there were only 28,600 Germans in the state. Yet, the German-born were over one-half the total foreign-born population. The Irish coming in next with 12,800 statewide. The Revolution of 1848 in Germany resulted with large numbers of young Germans fleeing their homeland for America. The new German immigrants, or the 48ers as they were called, were different in religious and political spirit from many of the earlier German families, many of whom were then living on the south side, south of Morris Street. The first wave of immigrants arrived here in the 1830s. The early settlement was on the east side, near Lockerbie. With increasing intensity, there existed an awareness of retaining German culture in an American setting. Stress was put on perpetuating the language along with German culture at home, in church, through newspapers, and in school and organizations. Mothers were urged to teach their children their native tongue. Church services continued to be conducted in German. The parish schools taught German, and often all religious instruction was given in German. Both political parties were asked to print the city ordinances in German as well as in English. The German language was voted to be taught in the public schools. Clubs and organizations were revived and founded, and business establishments sprang into life. Sport clubs and song groups were formed wherever Germans lived, and the number of published German newspapers increased. By the end of World War I, the German youth had grown up bilingual and were turning towards the American way of life rather than to the old-fashioned nostalgic culture of their elders. Because of the First World War, the German language was discontinued in the Indianapolis public schools. Although the act forbidding the teaching of the German language was repealed, it took a long time for the German language to be popular again. One by one, the German families trickled out of the south side, dispersing throughout the city. Today, there still exists some descendants of old German families living in the neighborhood south of Morris Street. However, they too are slowly leaving the area and are not being replaced by other German families. Many of the small businesses in the neighborhood were owned by German and Jewish proprietors. The German, if not a farmer, often brought a skill or trade with him to America. Many were carpenters, blacksmiths, watchmakers, jewelers, shoemakers, textile workers, upholsterers, silk weavers, butchers, or grocers. Others capitalized on their German heritage and opened up breweries, taverns, restaurants, bakeries, and dance halls. Joseph C. Miller, or J.C. as he was better known, started Miller's Market in October of 1900. The address was then 215 East Nebraska. The market still stands today in a new building at the same location, which is now 215 East Terrace. Back in earlier days, there was no refrigeration, so it was not uncommon for Southside residents to order food from the market on a daily basis. If you take a close look here, you'll notice the prices for some produce items. Spinach at 10 cents and tomatoes for 20 cents per pound. A dozen eggs would set you back 23 cents. The patronage for Miller's Market covered about 10 blocks in each direction.
My father then, when he married, he went to Anderson, and then when the natural gas over there was going low, he decided it would be a dead town, so he thought Indianapolis would be better territory to make a living. But when he got here, it wasn't that way. There was a panic, they called it those days, which we call a depression, and there was not much employment, and so he decided to open a store, a little grocery store, which was on every corner. There was a grocery store because those days nobody had any refrigeration or any transportation, and they had to go live close to a store to buy their food for the day, really, for every meal. And so he struggled through, and finally he developed a pretty good business.
Probably people don't realize that the German group in Indianapolis, indeed in Indiana, is the largest ethnic group. It's often said the ethnic groups in Indiana and Indianapolis in general don't constitute such a large part of the population. That's true to some extent. On the other hand, the groups are large enough to constitute a very strong influence on the culture and on the history of the city, indeed of the state. The German group in Indianapolis around 1900 was about 1/8 of the population of native German speakers. However, they owned 1/4 of the businesses.
Indianapolis has long been regarded as a leading supplier and source for carriages and wagons made in the United States. The oldest, best known, and most reliable of these manufacturers was John Gudelhofer. He was native to Germany and had resided in Indianapolis since 1869. He had been trained in the art of carriage making from his youth and possessed an intimate knowledge of all of the details of the business and the requirements of the public in the direction of trade. Gudelhofer initially founded his business in 1873, occupying a small shop on South Street. But in 1886, as his trade rapidly grew, he moved to a much larger accommodation at West Georgia and Kentucky Avenue. Gudelhofer personally supervised all work to ensure maximum quality. The work performed to build these quality crafted wagons and carriages was all done by hand. His business was considered unsurpassed by any in the market for strength, lightness, and reliability. After 1900, carriages were discontinued so that more attention could be concentrated on making bakery and dairy wagons, which were very much in demand. After John Gudelhofer relinquished the business, his three sons took over: Gus, Ben, and Otto. C.F. Schmidt, a German immigrant, established himself in Indianapolis. He and a Mr. Charles Yeager began a brewery in 1859. Mr. Yeager left the partnership, yet business continued until the Schmidt Brewery amalgamated with two others. The two other companies were Lieber and Mouse Breweries. However, the Schmidt Brewery was known for its extensive property, deep-dug cellars, and huge ice houses. Although these breweries are no longer in operation, they contributed to the growth of Indianapolis. Those breweries quenched many a thirst in the good old days when beer was a nickel a glass and was delivered to the corner saloon by horse-drawn wagon. It required 62 horses and 50 wagons to deliver their famous line of beer. Jim Talley, grandson of C.F. Schmidt, recalls those days when his grandfather brewed, bottled, and delivered beer a bit differently than they do now.
I think beers today are lighter, not light in the L-I-T-E beer, not that kind of light beer, but generally not as full-bodied. And the beers then were made more in the style of the German beers. After all, that's what these people knew, that they had just come over and that's what they wanted. Beers, I think, now have been tailored a little more to the American taste. Although I notice now around through the country, these so-called boutique breweries that are brewing beer that's completely natural and more like the original German beers. So there's apparently a market for it.
A stronger beer back then.
Not stronger in alcohol necessarily, but a little more flavor, stronger in flavor.
Between the 1870s and the 1930s, the South Side was booming commercially and industrially. Therefore, men usually had little trouble finding some kind of employment. Small businesses lined South Meridian, Fountain Square, and dotted the rest of the neighborhood. The large concentration of German immigrants on the South Side included those living in the Fountain Square area as well. The oldest German enclave of Indianapolis was Germantown, on the Near East Side, including the Lockerbie Square area. Many Germantown inhabitants moved down Virginia Avenue to establish a second enclave. There were numerous German businesses which developed in and contributed to Fountain Square's commercial area. Charles Kooring and Brother opened for business at 880 Virginia in 1885, specializing in residential heating systems. From bicycle and horse-drawn wagon deliveries in the late 1800s to today's radio-dispatched vans, Kooring's is a worthy representative of Fountain Square's long-standing commercial contribution to Indianapolis. Kooring and Sons moved from 1126 East Prospect after a fire in 1975 destroyed the historic wooden commercial building on Virginia Avenue. Throughout the history of the German Old South Side, an overabundance of leisure time and nothing with which to fill it has not been one of its major problems. The neighborhood was generally poor, so the entire family spent much of its day working. The kids were busy with school and with work after school. The adults usually worked 6 days a week. The head of a Jewish family, for example, worked from Sunday morning through Friday evening, and his free time was filled with Sabbath worship. There were times set aside, however, for relaxation, and as the immigrant's standard of living improved, his amount of free time did as well. Within the German community, a time was set aside for the enjoyment of music and song. It was a rare tavern or beer garden that did not have a band, especially on Sunday afternoons when many German families would come to rest, drink beer, and listen to music. One of the German bands from the near South Side that reached national prominence was the Goebes brothers, or better known as Harry and Albert von Tilzer. Together they produced over 3,000 popular tunes that included Take Me Out to the Ball Game and Wait Till the Sun Shines Nellie.
You can whistle von Tilzer songs. Anyone can sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Everyone remembers the words to She's Only a Bird in a Gilded Cage. The boys went from Indianapolis to New York, and they did most of their songwriting in Tin Pan Alley. Tin Pan Alley, that famous phrase, came from a style of writing of Von Tilzer's. He liked a rinky-dink piano effect, which became very popular. And in order to achieve this effect with an ordinary piano, he stuffed pieces of paper in between the piano wires. A friend of his came in and noticed that the sound was rather strange and said it was as if he were beating on a tin pan. Thus came the phrase Tin Pan Alley, because at that time the Von Tilzers were writing most of the hits coming out of Tin Pan Alley.
In 1941, Adolf Bickel was a member of an organization known as the Edelweiss Club. The Edelweiss being that small petaled flower that grew on the slopes of the Swiss Alps. And the Edelweiss Club, that social, beer-drinking musical club, would go out in search of the Edelweiss. It's sort of like going out snipe hunting or watching the local submarine races, if you know what I mean.
Well, when we first came over here, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. We had nothing but soccer on our mind. That's what we did in the old country. So we practiced in Governor Park, and some Scotchman happened to see us playing there, and he asked me to join the Scotch Soccer Club, and we did. And I've seen to it that we get more players, German fellows that I knew at night school, into the team. And we did. We got about 3 the first year and 8 the second year. So we won the state championship for the Scotch Club. And the following year we started the German Soccer Club, Deutscher Fußballclub. And we took the championship away from the Scotch again. But we kept on playing with the Scotch anyway. It was that we took the championship away from them. There was no bad feeling. At those days, we had about 18 teams to play here in town. And it was always we had on our mind, playing soccer, playing soccer.
Most of the popular clubs formed by the German community were those founded for the cultivation of music and song. The Talentverein and the Concordia were German dramatic, singing, and dancing societies that led to Indianapolis's opening of its first commercial theaters in 1859. Fountain Square's commercial district had more operating theaters than could be found in Indianapolis from 1910 to 1950. Among the theaters located there was Fountain Square Theater, the Air Dorm, which was later replaced by Green Theater, also the Sanders Theater, and the BQ. Kids on the Old South Side loved to play baseball. They played in the parks, in the school playgrounds, and in vacant lots. They also played ball in the communal building courtyard. First base was the corner of the building, second base would be the log cabin, Third base was a pipe down into the cellar, and home plate was Morris Street. The outfield was the Comuna Building rooftop and Kansas Street. Many of the boys would go to watch the pickle puller baseball team play ball in a field on Bluff Road, south of Troy Avenue. Let it be said that Sacred Heart Church fielded its fair share of baseball teams over the years. The various national and ethnic groups in the community have existed side by side with little evidence of overt antagonism. The Germans who lived south of Morris Street rarely came into contact, outside of work and schooling, with the residents north of Morris Street. In addition, German Catholics usually sent their children to the Sacred Heart schools instead of the public schools. The Irish, blacks, and Jewish who lived north of Morris Street lived in and among each other. The community of the Old South Side was also divided along religious lines. The Irish Catholics attended St. John's and St. Patrick's churches, while the German Catholics went to Sacred Heart. German Protestants attended St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church, Frieden's German Evangelical Church, Emmanuel Reformed Church, and other congregations.
Sacred Heart Church was and is a cornerstone for the Southside German community. Here one could easily trace his life from beginning to end, with baptism, First Communion, Mass, parish athletics, marriages, and funerals. If you've ever been to Sacred Heart, you know that it's rich with history, and its sanctuary is easily one of the most beautiful in the city.
When Sacred Heart Parish was founded, its congregation consisted of approximately 70 families. The parish experienced steady growth, and by 1900 numbered over 600 families, practically all of Germanic origin. The single building the parish had constructed in 1875 to serve as church, school, and priest's residence was soon outgrown. In 1883, construction of the present church was begun according to plans drawn up by a member of the Franciscan order, Brother Adrian Weber. Brother Adrian is credited with designing over 100 churches, including the Archabbey at St. Minrot. For Sacred Heart, he planned a large Gothic revival-style structure seating over 700. Because of the parish's funds being limited, only a part of the church could be built in 1883, and it wasn't until 1891 that the eastern end of the church, with its two large steeples, was completed. Many of the German priests and brothers stationed at the parish were trained in woodworking and helped create the interior furnishings. The pulpit and communion rail were hand-carved by these craftsmen. Other items, such as the stations of the cross and many of the religious statues which adorn the interior, were imported from art studios in Munich. Today, this kind of old-world craftsmanship can be seen throughout the structure. The parish bought a large pipe organ in 1889, but ran into a peculiar problem when trying to install it. The organ required electric power, but the power company had not yet extended its service to this part of the South Side. The problem was solved when the president of the city's streetcar company allowed the church to hook up to a nearby electric trolley power line and provided electricity to the organ at no charge. Besides fulfilling the religious needs of Southside Catholics, Sacred Heart provided educational, athletic, and social opportunities. Within a year of the parish's founding, a grade school was established. In keeping with the neighborhood's heritage, students were required to learn not only the 3 R's, but also the German language. While this requirement was dropped during the First World War, at least one Mass every Sunday featured a sermon in German until the 1920s, and priests continued to hear confessions in either language for many years after that. In 1915, the parish took the unusual step of establishing its own high school. Besides providing more advanced education for the young people of the parish, the high school ultimately provided another outlet for their athletic aspirations. Athletics had always been important to the parishioners. Early in the church's history, individual parish societies, such as the Men's Society, had sponsored baseball and basketball teams and competed with other Southside organizations for many years. The parish high school sports teams brought greater renown to the Germans of the South Side. Even though Sacred Heart High School always had a relatively small enrollment, its teams were often more than a match for larger schools. The parish also organized a dramatic club within a few years of its founding. Finding an appropriate hall in which to stage productions was a major problem until 1895. At that time, when the second grade school building was being constructed, the second floor was designed as a theater, complete with a stage and scenery and seating for over 1,000. Hundreds of plays were enacted by the Parish Dramatic Club for the next 40 years. The school also went on the road, taking their shows to such cities as Muncie, Batesville, Shelbyville, and Greensburg. The near South Side began to decline in the late 1950s and early 1960s as more and more people began to move to the suburbs. With fewer young people in the neighborhood, enrollment in Sacred Heart School fell. Ultimately, the parish high school merged with Chartrand High School to form Roncalli, and they, in turn, joined with other Catholic grade schools on the South Side to form Central Catholic. Sacred Heart Parish still remains a strong force on the South Side and still remains proud of its German heritage. The Southside Turnverein Hall at 306 East Prospect Avenue remains a monument to the city's German South Side. Completed in 1900, it was constructed by the Southside Turnverein as its gymnasium and social hall. The Southside Turnverein was the third such Turnverein or gymnastic society organized in the city and founded on November 5, 1893. It was formed to serve the needs of the Southside Turners, who previously belonged to the Zotzelizer Turnverein that built Das Dutchhaus at 401 East Michigan Street, now known as the Athenaeum. The Southside Turners were disgruntled that the Zotzelizer Turnverein had moved its hall from 221 East Pearl Street to 5 blocks northward at 401 East Michigan. They formed their own Verein and located their hall on the South Side. The Turners were active competitors in gymnastic, track and field events, and mass exercises, the forerunner of aerobics today. The Turners went to regional, national, and international Turnfests. Indianapolis hosted an international Turnfest in 1905, which included a parade on Washington Street and Monument Circle. There was also a major competition that took place at the State Fairgrounds. The Turnverein movement started in Prussia in 1811 with the introduction of the philosophy of Friedrich Ludwig Jung, who advocated physical exercise and education, resulting in a sound mind and a sound body.
That's our look today at the German immigrants on the Old South Side of Indianapolis. For Hoosier History, I'm Rick Maultra.